Welcome to the Industries in Motion podcast from RBC Capital Markets, where we'll be exploring what's new and what's next in today's fast-moving markets and industries to help you stay ahead of the curve. Please listen to the end of this podcast for important disclaimers. My name is Mark Odendahl, and I am head of U.S. Capital Markets Research. Let's get into today's episode. I'm happy to introduce our next guest, Dr. Luca Issi. He is our Senior Biotech Analyst at RBC Capital Markets. Luca is part of a larger biotech team here at RBC, where we have 4 senior analysts publishing research in the U.S. Luca joined RBC in 2020. Prior to RBC, he was an investor at Bain Capital Life Sciences, where he led private and public investments across biopharmaceuticals, medical devices, specialty pharma, and tools and diagnostics. Luca, thanks for joining today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
Luca, I first off want to say congratulations. You joined in 2020. You quickly rolled out on the cell and gene therapy areas. You followed that up in 2021 with a successful expansion of your coverage in gene editing. So we're really excited to have you on the podcast today to take us through those subsectors of this evolving sector in the biotech industry. Your recent initiations mentioned that genetic medicine is a new wave of innovation in biotech. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to, Mark. So I think the bad news here is that we have 5,000 to 8,000 monogenic diseases, meaning diseases that are caused by a single gene, and many more that are actually polygenic in nature, caused by more than one gene. So that's the bad news. However, the good news is that now we have a toolbox that allows us to actually tackle many of those diseases, and the money is just pouring in. We actually put in our initiation support in the last few years, $150 billion has been deployed across VC, equity market, partnerships, and M&A. And, this influx of capital has actually made an impact for patients and shareholders, right? We have 18 drugs that are currently approved in the genetic medicine space. We have 10 more that we believe are going to come down the pike in the foreseeable future. Many of them are actually already on the calendar from, on the FDA. A few PDUFA dates are already scheduled for either later this year or early next year. And probably, Mark, I think the COVID vaccine is the epitome of what genetic medicine can do. This is mRNA. And this vaccine has made a huge impact for both humanity and shareholders, right? Recent publications from Yale suggest 280,000 deaths have been prevented by this vaccine. 1.2 million hospitalizations have been prevented by this vaccine. And at the same time, Pfizer and Moderna together this year are going to generate more than $50 billion in revenues from these vaccines. So again, perfect example of a space and applications where genetic medicine have made an impact for both shareholders as well as patients and humanity.
When you think about genetic medicine, what are the key modalities that define the space?
The way I think about it is 4 different buckets. So there is a way to turn off genes. This is called RNAi or RNA interference. There are ways to actually do the exact opposite. Instead of turning off genes, you want to turn on genes. And you can do that either with gene therapy or mRNA. We already talked about mRNA earlier. And then you have the latest and greatest, which is gene editing. You mentioned in your comments earlier. This is kind of the latest and greatest in genetic medicine. This is essentially a way to edit genes, and you can edit them in a variety of ways. You can turn them off, you can turn them on, you can correct them, you can insert sequencings there. So very, very exciting space. And then the fourth one is really cell therapy, which is a way essentially using cells as a therapeutic. So instead of developing a drug or a monoclonal antibody, you are essentially delivering cells. And again, we already have a few drugs that are approved, like Kymriah and Yescarta in the cell therapy space, and many more coming down the pike.
That's a great rundown. On RNAi, how did we go from an interesting molecular finding in worms to a $40 billion in market cap?
Yeah, that's a fascinating story, Mark. So just to maybe quick history, Andrew Fire and Craig Mello won the Nobel Prize back in 2006. They showed work that they'd done actually in the late 90s that if you deliver a small piece of RNA in worms, you can actually turn off certain genes, like small pieces of RNA. And these are like tiny little 1 millimeter worms called C. elegans. And, the exciting part of that is that other researchers soon after, Mark Hay primarily, essentially replicated those findings from worms to actual mice. And so once you prove that this technology could be used in mammalian cells, the race was on, right? So we got a lot of companies starting, a lot of VC money getting to this space. Pharma was absolutely all over it. You got AbbVie and Pfizer having internal programs. You got Takeda, Roche, and Novartis signing multi-billion-dollar deals with Alnylam. You got some acquisition in that space as well. Actually, Merck bought Cerna for $1.1 billion. So it was very, very exciting space. And then in early 2010, data didn't pan out. And we have had multiple issues. Alnylam had a mortality imbalance for one of the drugs called Revolutionizing. Arrowhead had to essentially go back to the drawing board as they had a few deaths in non-human primates, which was problematic. Both companies had to go through multiple rounds of layoffs, unfortunately. Merck, that bought Cerna for $1.1 billion, had to sell Cerna for $200 million, almost a $900 million loss. And investors gave up hope. And this was a space that was no longer hot and sexy. And what has happened after that, if you look at the chart from 2015, like very few investors stuck around, but from 2015, Alnylam moved from being a $3 billion market cap company to a $25 billion market cap company. Arrowhead was trading in cash. Now it's a $7 billion market cap company. Dicerna was trading in cash. Now it's a $1.5 billion market cap company. So I think this is a great example where innovations took many twists and turns, if you will. It was a roller coaster ride, but the investors that actually stuck with this technology actually got incredibly rewarded.
Thank you. Where is RNAi going from here?
Yeah, I think a $40 billion market cap could be just the tip of the iceberg. We have, multiple companies that are working on the next iteration of the technology. We think this is a technology that is fairly de-risked at this point. You have companies like Alnylam working on innovations around dosing instead of essentially dosing less frequently than it is today, potentially stretching the doses up to 6 months or twice a year type of an injection. You have companies like Arrowhead working on cardiovascular targets like ApoC3, ANG3, or Lp(a). And I do believe that many of these targets at this point are fairly de-risked.
Thank you. Let's pivot to an additional bucket that we discussed earlier, and that's gene therapy. We have seen multiple setbacks in the space. What is your latest thinking there?
I feel like innovation occurs linearly. So there's like kind of a linear progression in innovation, and sometimes investors' excitement can be either above or below the mean. And this is certainly a time where investor sentiment is way below the mean. And just to make it maybe a finer point, if you look at gene therapy, just up to like 9 months ago, cumulatively, gene therapy was a $60 billion market in terms of market cap. Now it's a $40 billion market cap, right? So you got $20 billion overall of value that has been destroyed. But I do believe that now it's a great time to look into gene therapy. The reason why I believe that is the froth is gone, right? The valuation have materially pulled back. We do have clarity on the regulatory path. There was an FDA advisory committee meeting just weeks ago, and then advisory committee meeting, I believe, was pretty benign and actually gave companies and sponsor great transparency on what they need to do to essentially get these drugs over the finish line.
Let's move now to gene editing. What are the implications of the recent Intalia data for the broader field?
Yeah, just as much as gene therapy has been depressing, gene editing has been exciting. We've seen a lot of innovation in that space. Just for context, again, gene editing is a way to edit different genes. Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier essentially figured out that bacteria, when they get infected by viruses, they can fight the infection, and then they essentially take a mugshot of that virus and takes a piece of DNA from that virus and actually put it in their own genome. And, Emmanuel Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna essentially figured out that this technology can also be used in other cells. And now we have this great tool that allows us to edit genes in humans. We've seen a ton of IPOs in the space. The cumulative market cap actually went from $9 billion 12 months ago to actually $40 billion today when you look at the whole space more broadly. And, the Intellia data, some people comparing to Neil Armstrong going on the moon for the first time. Well, this is the first time they were editing hepatocytes in human beings. And the data over the summer was pretty exciting. We've seen pretty strong reduction in TTR, up to 90+%. And so, we think that Intellia is potentially in a position to convert a disease that today is managed chronically via either siRNA or with oral small molecule, potentially with a one and done approach. And so that has been a very important moment for the whole field.
Thank you. And lastly, what about cell therapy? So many patients already benefit from cell therapy, but we've also seen recent setbacks with allo's clinical hold. What are your latest thoughts around cell therapy and the differences that we're seeing there?
Yeah, as you mentioned, multiple patients already benefited from autologous CAR Ts. Again, Yescarta and Kymriah are already $1 billion market today. But the goal for cell therapy is really to pivot from autologous CAR T to allogeneic CAR T. So autologous CAR T, which is the current standard of care, is a fairly complex process that requires complex logistics, where essentially the T cells are taken from the patients, are shipped into a centralized facility. The molecular biology is done in the centralized facility, and then these cells are actually shipped back to the patients before they're infused. But the goal here is to transition from this complex approach to an off-the-shelf approach. Having cells that are ready to go, that would be very, very important, especially for patients that are rapidly progressing with non-Hodgkin lymphoma or multiple myeloma or other indications. And look, so far the data has been encouraging. The response rate, the radiographic response rate has been actually pretty good. The issue has been around durability. These T cells don't stay in the bloodstream for as long as we would like them to stay. And as you mentioned, the Allogene's clinical hold last week was not helpful. However, the investigation is still ongoing. It's entirely possible that what we have seen so far for Allogene is just a molecular finding that does not have any clinical consequences. So again, let's have the investigation play out, and then we'll see what happens there. But when I kind of step back from Allogene and the clinical hold, and I look at this field more broadly, I think the companies are using the right approach. Like Allogene and CRISPR are thinking about consolidation dosing, right? So that could be a way to improve durability. Instead of doing a single injection, you can do 2 injections back to back. They're planning to combine this approach with gamma secretase inhibitors.
It's been a fascinating conversation, and it's an exciting space to cover. Given all this innovation and the need for pharmaceuticals to replenish their pipelines, how do you think about M&A in this sector?
Size works against innovation. And pharmas have 2 things. One, they have lots of patent expires coming down the pike soon, and 2, lots of cash. And if you look at this whole space, and if you look at where innovation has happened, most of the transformative innovation has not happened organically by pharma, has happened actually in biotech companies that then end up being acquired by pharma companies. So I know M&A has been disappointing this year. We have not had the number and the volume of the transactions that we have had in prior years. But again, this is the lifeblood of this industry. This really is the lifeblood of this industry. And I think it's just a matter of time. Then M&A will probably come back. And I think when I think about my space more broadly, I think that the strategic appeal of my company's for pharma is only bound to get larger over time, primarily because these companies are now in a position to potentially graduate from developing drugs for rare genetic diseases to much, much larger indications, right?
Thanks for all the insights today. You do a great job talking through all the different pathways of this innovative field that you're in, and congrats on quickly becoming a leader in genetic medicine.
Fantastic, Mark. It was a great conversation. I appreciate your time.
What else lies ahead in today's ever-evolving markets and industries? We will be keeping track right here on Industries in Motion. Until then, thank you for joining us on this episode, recorded October 20th, 2021. Make sure you subscribe to Industries in Motion wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you'd like to continue this conversation, or you are interested in more information, please contact your RBC representative directly or visit our website at www.rbccm.com/Industries in Motion for further insights. Thank you.
This content is based on information available at the time it was recorded and is for informational purposes only. It is not an offer to buy or sell or a solicitation, and no recommendations are implied. It is outside the scope of this communication to consider whether it is suitable for you and your financial objectives.